Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Board of Education meeting for February 27th, 2023. I'd like to start by pointing out the exits. We have 2 exits in the rear of the room and 2 exits behind us here on the dais. Let's all stand for the pledge. Okay, I'd like to start with recognition of visitors. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment at tonight's meeting. Now and at the end of the meeting, this first session will be capped at 30 minutes total. Anyone who does not get to speak now will be able to do so later. Comments including obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, or statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Anyone wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. Finally, please remember there is no cross-dialogue between speakers and members of the board. Anyone wishing to speak is invited to step forward to the microphone, identify yourself, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone wishing to get a response directly, you can leave your contact information right here at the dais. There's a form right at the end of the table over there. Thank you.
Hello, there we go. Hi, John Hines, district resident, alumni, math teacher, but tonight I'm speaking as the CCTA secretary with correspondence for the Board of Education. This is a notice of claim pursuant to section 381.13 of education law. Please take notice that the Cornwall Central Teachers Association and each member of the association has a collective and individual claim against the Cornwall Board of Education and the Cornwall Central School District based on the district's violation of the New York State Public Employees Fair Employment Act. The notice of claim. On February 7, 2013, in response to grievances filed by the association on behalf of a group of elementary teachers, every bargaining unit member received an email from the superintendent of schools. Additionally, upon information and belief, the superintendent sent this email to other district employees who are not members of the association. This email constitutes union interference, direct dealing, and retaliation, violating section 209A, 1A, B, C, and D, when the superintendent publicly shared grievance discussions. The association maintains that this email is a clear demonstration of anti-union animus in further violation of the act. Further, by sharing grievances and status of discussions concerning a potential resolution of those grievances with the entire association as well as other district employees, the superintendent is engaging in a form of direct dealing prohibited by the act. The superintendent is attempting to reach around association leadership in order to improperly persuade members to urge the leadership to accept a resolution preferred by the district. Additionally, the superintendent violated the act by unilaterally canceling all professional development opportunities, claiming the district's actions were necessary due to the magnitude of these pending grievances and potentially significant financial and operational impact that they could have on the district. Some of these professional development opportunities were provided pursuant to an obligation of the collective bargaining agreement and other required due to a bona fide past practice. In all instances, the decision to cancel and maintain in which this decision was made, both announced violated the act. Moreover, in canceling all professional development, even though sessions previously scheduled and approved, the district has created a situation that will permanently and negatively impact bargaining unit members whose legitimate and proper previously approved expectations of earning credit for salary advancement have now been stymied. Therefore, the claimant demands that the district cease violating the act and that the district immediately restore all suspended professional development time to bargaining unit members and make impacted members whole. Thank you. I also have copies for the Board of Education if you have not received this so far.
Thank you, John. Okay, anybody else? All right.
True.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Joelle Aguilar, kindergarten teacher here at CES and parent and alumni as well. My comment is more having to do with the new housing development that potentially will be built in the New Windsor area of our school district. Just wanted to put it out there to the school board. I'm not sure if any of you have considered or are going to work with the town board in Cornwall to kind of help them understand how that size housing development greatly impacts our schools here and the resources that we're able to provide the students. As we all well know, our dollars go, we try to get them to stretch a very long way here. And adding a minimum, possibly just a minimum of 328 new children to this district. I mean, we all know that some households might not have any children at all, but other households might have 3 or 4 or 5 children because it is a multifamily, they're multifamily units. So potentially it could be more than 328 students that will be entering our school district if that housing development is built. And it's not just the schools that it will affect, it will just affect our whole infrastructure on the whole directly in the Cornwall area, but also in the surrounding New Windsor areas as well. So I just wanted to put it out there because it's something that does then trickle down to the teachers, the special teachers, whatever, and then to the kids themselves. So I just want everybody to consider that. If you haven't considered it yet, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Aguilar. Okay, with that, we will move on to our superintendent's update. Our student reps are, we gave them the night off because of the inclement weather, so we're going to move right into our second report. Sorry? We will, yes, the reports have been published, so anybody can access them there. So I'll pass it on to Superintendent Terry Date.
So the only update that I have for the board, there's 2 personnel actions on the agenda with newly created positions, 1 district-wide E&L teacher and 1 district-wide special education teacher. This isn't new information for the board. We discussed at a previous meeting some of the needs of the district as they evolve over the course of the year. We have seen an increase in our E&L enrollment. So we stated that if it was possible to hire a highly qualified candidate now, we would do so, also knowing that we have a retirement going into next year, so it could be helpful for a hard-to-fill position. Same goes with the special education teacher and the conversations we've had about co-teach and supports for our students. So they're both supported by current needs. With regards to funding, there have been some positions that have gone unfilled for this year, in addition to modifying some of the plans for our federal funds. Again, TAs are really difficult to hire across the course of the entire year, so there's funds there that we've been able to shift around. So between those 2 sources of funds is how we're able to potentially hire right now, but we wanted to get it on the docket for newly created positions so that when we do find a candidate, we can go ahead and put them forward for approval by the board.
Thank you, Terry.
Just a quick follow-up. You said the E&L position, there's going to be a forthcoming retirement at the end of the school year. Does the same hold for the special education teacher?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. That brings us to the President's update. So I want to first start by responding to some comments and questions that were brought up at last meeting. We received a question from Ms. Barbara Gosda regarding college-level courses that we offer to our high school students. This is not the first time Ms. Gazda has expressed her opposition to these courses. At this point, I think this might be an agree to disagree type of issue. Just to be clear, the district provides programs that gets our students ready for life after graduation. For some, that means CTEC courses for students who want to learn a skill so they can successfully enter the workforce. For others, it means college-level courses so they can have a better chance of being accepted to top colleges and universities. We understand not everyone agrees with that, and it's fine to disagree. Other comments from last meeting, Ms. Christine Diaz spoke about getting additional support for her children. Since that meeting, Ms. Diaz has met with Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, Megan Argenio, to discuss these very issues. We have also updated Ms. Diaz's email to ensure that there are no further gaps in communication. Speaking of communication, Ms. Amber Bertinelli asked to be included in high school communication moving forward. She will be added to that email list. And I would just say anyone wishing to be added to the school messenger list for any school can simply reach out to the central office and request that, and we'd be happy to include whoever asks. Finally, in response to CCHS student Oliver Zhang's comment regarding Calculus BC, this isn't a funding issue really, it's more a building level concern. And after speaking with the administrative team, they've assured me that they will be looking into that issue to see what's possible. Okay, and now I want to speak, Ms. Aguilar brought up the Biagini Woods development. I just want to speak to that very briefly. I know there's been a lot of community discussion regarding that proposed housing development, and I just want to assure the public that we are aware of this issue and we will be working with council to protect our interests. Just so everyone understands, however, this is an issue before the Town Planning Board. That board will be holding a public scoping hearing next Monday, March 6th at 7 p.m. at Cornwall Central High School. I implore anyone who has questions or concerns to attend that meeting and either present your comments in person or submit them via writing to the Town Building Department. The Board of Education will be sure that our questions and concerns are submitted as well. If you're looking for more information, the map and supporting documents related to that project are on file and may be inspected at the Town Clerk's office. Final point, I'd like to quickly pass it to Jim, who is our legislative liaison. He has an update on the Capitol Conference Lobby Day. Jim.
Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, so I guess it was a week and a half ago, the 15th. Went up to Albany, had some meetings set up with the Orange County School Boards Association. Karen Meyer set them up. So we had a couple of representatives from Washingtonville, 2 from Minnesink, and Karen from Oxba. We had a meeting with State Senator Skoufis. Covered just mainly most of the issues that you've all seen in your email, the lobbying points from NISBA as well as the lobbying points from Oxba. Talked about changing the formulas for the tax cap because they haven't been changed since 2000, but he is on board with fully supporting, changes to foundation aid. He's on board with updating that if they can work on that. As far as tax caps, I guess there's negative tax caps allowed, and some school districts said we don't want that to be the case. We want to set a baseline at 0 at least. I think the real points that we discussed that were important to our district, I brought up the UPK reimbursement rate, and he said that he would not expect an adjustment on the reimbursement rate until UPK is fully phased in across everybody in the state, so until all school districts are fully offering it for every student. So I would not expect any more money from that, because he's obviously a big proponent and a big champion of that. So if that's his stance, then I can imagine that we're not going to see any changes there. And the other issue that a lot of people had concerns about were the initiative to replace all buses with electric buses. So I think it's 2027 that all new bus purchases need to be electric buses, and there's a full phase-in 2035. So basically he said, everybody in the room kind of said, hey, it's a great idea in theory, but there's a lot of things that aren't taken into account, especially the folks from Minnesink are like, we have a very huge geographical school district. The way electric buses are right now, we might have to buy 2 sets of buses. It might not be able to make an entire bus run without running out of charge. So Senator Skoufis his thought process was that he thought that the initiative would move forward, but that the timelines would keep getting kicked down the road until the technology caught up with it or more state funding became available. So we also met with Assemblymember Ekus. He was sadly called down to the floor, so we met with his chief of staff and a legislative aide, talked about many of the same issues. Similar conversations. They were, in favor of the electric buses, but understood the district's concerns that those deadlines be pushed down the road. So the UPK is just, as we begin to discuss the budget tonight, the real important point that I wanted to share with everybody. So, thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda. The consent agenda allows the Board of Education to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover relatively routine matters. Is there any member of the board who would like to pull a particular item off the consent agenda?
Brendan?
Yep.
I would like to pull under item number 13, policy 9645.
Okay, so we'll just have to pull the whole thing.
Oh, we have to pull it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following consent agenda items as submitted by the Superintendent of Schools. So that's items 2 through 12. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. So now on to item number 13. Resolved upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education does hereby accept the second reading of BOE policies. Take the rest per document. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And discussion. John?
So under the section that reads internal reporting and investigation, the last sentence, and I'll read it, as I think it's in, as the red indicates, which means the change, as I understand it, says, upon receiving a report of alleged wrongful conduct, the board superintendent or designee may take immediate steps to authorize an investigation. My question is the use of the term may versus, say, in other policies where we see the term will. My sense is, I don't know if that is intentional or an oversight, but from my perspective, if someone has made an accusation of wrongdoing, it's incumbent on all of us to run it to ground to determine what's what. And saying that we may do an investigation suggests that we have an option there, and I don't think fiduciarily speaking we do. So I just throw it out there. I know Teresa's not here, but Bass, you're part of the policy committee. I don't know if that was discussed, if there's precedent to that, but I just throw it out there because it seems not as tight as I would normally expect our policies to read.
Yeah, John, yeah, thanks. When I first read the term, I mean, my own understanding, and I didn't argue for or against, because my understanding is that you keep yourself the option of doing. So, and that would be kind of case-by-case thing. If you say will, that's like you have to do it, no matter what.
So I guess my question would be, how do you know an allegation is actual or frivolous if you don't do an investigation? And that's the purpose of the investigation, right? Is to determine, I guess, the validity or the lack of validity on something. And saying that we have an option, I think our duty would be to do the investigation. But that's just my perspective. If others have a different view, I could respect that. But you know, my time in governance suggests that will would be the proper term there.
Yeah, I don't recall what the debate around that word in particular, so I'm not sure why may was chosen over will, other than, Bass's suggestion. It was just to give more leeway. I don't know,
Yeah,
Larry, if you recall
I don't remember a
anything.
discussion on that word either.
We did not have a discussion on that word. I mean, just
In
like,
this instance.
yeah, no, we didn't discuss may versus will. We did not. But my own understanding of the term. I mean, that's what I just
Yeah.
said, yeah.
Yeah, that was, we had a general discussion, yeah.
And the conversation opened with, this was a NISBA reviewed policy change, so all the revisions are NISBA revisions. So we just talked about there's reasons why they made so many changes to this policy based on things happening around the state. So we felt that with their lawyers and attorneys reviewing this, that we would just adopt what they suggested. My team really, it doesn't matter shall versus will or may. But I know that this was a NISBA reviewed policy change.
Yeah, there are other examples. I mean, just going a paragraph down, any building principal receiving a report must relay this information. The previous was shall. So that seems, there seems to be some intent around that, like the difference in this instance versus the may. And to Terry's point, there seems to be some logic there from NISBA. I can't speak to what that is. You know,
I noticed that we're getting away from. I noticed that we're getting away from the use of the term shall. We're migrating to will, which is, I think, legally the preferable term to use, right? If you're a lawyer, I guess they get hot on that. I hear what Terry said about, that it's gone through NISMA review and they suggested we use may. Okay. I don't believe that's proper for this organization to adopt a stance where people make accusations. 9/11 is a very meaningful day for me. I think of the term that came out of it: if you see something, say something. And for us to take the position that, well, we may look into something if someone makes an accusation, it doesn't speak well to me. And I think it puts the district's reputation at risk. But if the powers that be have already looked at this, then again, I'm just probably out there on an island by myself.
I think if we take a look at what the word investigation means, that's not necessarily defined here. That an investigation could very well be a quick look into it, and if it's appropriate, then move it forward. But I hear what John's saying. If we made that as a will, and that will means it's a quick look to, as opposed to just blowing somebody off. If that had come up at the night of our meeting, I think we would have the same kind of a conversation.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I think if, the only reason I can think of, and I'm not NISBA obviously, would be maybe you don't need to conduct an investigation and you just go straight to action. But even if you went straight to action, almost by default, there was some investigation involved, right? It could have been very quick, and it could have been the answer could have been very apparent, but you would have had to look into it. So I would
Right,
lean
facts
towards that.
before acts, right?
Sure,
That's-
sure.
and
And
how you get
to
facts, you
Larry's point,
investigate.
an investigation can happen in 5 seconds because you have a smoking gun, so to speak. It would still qualify as an investigation. So I mean, unless there's no.
Maybe to clarify the meaning of the term will, I mean, you can maybe, I don't know, expand a little bit on it, and it's like, will reserve the right to,
Then you're
because
right
that's
back
what it means.
You're right back at May
know?
then. Look, I mean, to make this simple, I think we can change this to will and proceed from there. I mean, unless
Yeah.
there's no, it's a NISBA recommendation. It's
I'm
not,
comfortable with that.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not a requirement.
it's not a requirement.
This is our policy. not
Sure.
Right,
theirs,
right.
Yeah. So are we good with that? We will, and Harvey, that will be noted. We'll change that to will. All right. Any other questions, comments?
Good catch.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. That brings us to presentations. So tonight, Assistant Superintendent of Business Harvey Sotland will give his first budget presentation for the upcoming 2023-24 school year. Harvey.
So good evening, everyone. Tonight, we begin, once again, the public presentation of the 23-24 budget, just a mere 4 months away. Some of the things we're going to be talking about, first, we're going to just touch on the budget development process. I'd just like to remind everybody of the process. We go over it every year. Then we want to jump into the needs assessment. Before we can even talk about anything about rolling over the budget and what it entails and so forth, what are our true needs that we need to keep in the back of our head as we go through this entire process over the next several months? We're going to do a quick look at some past needs that we've assessed and we've funded. I think that's important for everybody to do a little look back to see what we've done. Then we're going to shift to the budget parameters and variables. Really, what's driving the budget that we're going to be working on. And then lastly, just to put some perspective on the tax levy itself, we'll be taking a look at how it looks historically. So the development process itself, you hear me say this very often, it's not a set period of time. It's a continuous process. We do it nonstop. Yes, this time of the year we kind of formulate it for each particular year, but the actual aggregation, the analysis, the assessments, it's all done throughout the year. It includes all the stakeholders, all the way from the community, all the way up to administrators, including everyone in between. And really, the discussions that are held, whatever the assessment, whatever the want, whatever the thought is that might aid us, help us, we always look at where are we now? And what you wish or what you would like to add, how does it contribute or how does it improve student outcome or achievement? And if it does, how do we get there? And that's really what the culmination of what you're going to see over the next 2 or 3 months really speaks toward. So the first thing we want to look at is the needs, as I mentioned. Over the last 2 years alone, we have addressed and funded $2.7 million worth of needs. If we look at just to start with the current year, 22-23, it's about $1.5 million. And you can see there the two big items there are our initiation of and rolling out of the UPK program, as well the air conditioning project over at the middle school. When we go back 1 year to 21-22, you'll see a much broader spectrum of needs that we've addressed. Again, about 1.2 million. If you look at all of the items there, because it's really quite a bit, we really touch on the 3 A's, the athletics, the arts, and the academics. Everybody was in this pool. So let's shift now to the future, 23-24, the year that we're coming up on. We have taken all the needs and the assessments that we've gathered over the years. We've culminated it into the budget requests and the meetings that we've had with the administrators. We've discussed them, we've reviewed them, we've scrubbed them, and you're going to see them in a minute. It's important to also note that anytime you see on any of these needs any kind of a position or anything that deals with salary or compensation, that's an all-in cost. So if Mary Jones's benefits, retirement, etc. Okay? Now, with that said, as I shift into the next slide, which begins our needs by building, I'm going to ask Megan to join me. And the reason for that is a lot of the needs this year, a far greater amount, are instructional in nature. And I'd like to have the ability for her to provide a deeper narrative on each of these.
Good evening. So as Harvey has shared, we have a lot of needs that are specific to instruction. So it's exciting time to be able to talk about all of these, but we have to kind of give you a strong narrative as to why. So when we had the federal funding, we put them into these buckets here on the elementary level. So as you can see, we currently have 2 full-time teachers that push into 3rd and 4th grade at CES, and then the same model follows with 1 full-time and 1 full-time at COH and Willow Avenue. Additionally, we have 2 full-time K2 teachers at CES, 1 full-time K2 at COH, and 1 full-time K2 at Willow Avenue. In providing this instruction in this new model, it has been proven very successful because we are able to build a classroom within a classroom situation. It allows for small group intensive instruction, and it meets our tier 1 needs within our classroom environment. So this is a model that in building our new structure, we would like to see continue. Harvey, I don't know if you want to talk about the breakout.
Right. So the reason that we broke this out the way it's listed here, you'll see there the above will be funded through the required use of the set aside. I'm going to be talking about this when we get into the revenue side, but the bottom line is that the increase that we will be receiving in foundation aid, the governor's proposal indicates that we have to pull out about $550,000, and we are required to use that for specific use of group, small group, or individual instruction for grades 3-8 in the reading and math area.
Can I ask a question on that? I understand that that was in the budget, right? And my understanding is that's required for 425 districts in the state based on learning loss and the focus on having high impact tutorials at least 3 times a week. And I guess there's a lot of discussion about, is it 3 times a week, is it 2 times a week, whatever to make the to match the requirement. Is that what we're talking about here?
This is what we're talking about.
So we were designated as
Yes,
one
we
of
were.
those districts?
Yes.
So learning loss is real here?
It's not.
According to the governor's budget and the requirements, learning loss is real here in
The criteria that identified us
Yeah.
was a criteria based on the increase in foundation aid. So if there was there's a certain
it's-
threshold, a foundation aid increase
okay.
then requires us to do a required set aside.
So what this does is this allows us to continue moving forward with the instruction, John, over here that we're talking about, is that it allows us to continue with the instructional model that we have found to be very successful on the elementary level, allowing for push-in instruction, small group support, and intensive needs for our kids. After that, you'll see a full-time elementary teacher on the elementary level. We continue to see growth in enrollment on the elementary level. This helps to reduce our class sizes. We currently, in our K2 world, have 8 classes that are between 25 to 26 students. So in adding another teacher on the elementary level, we'll be able to help offset that number. Okay, additionally, with the federally funded positions, is a position we would like to keep on the elementary level is a full-time counselor. So prior to the funds, we had a social worker at CES, a social worker at COH, and a social worker at Willow Avenue. The mandated needs come first, so students who have IEP mandated needs receive those counseling supports from the social workers on the elementary level. Here specifically at CES, that becomes increasingly difficult because the number of mandated students is larger just due to the volume of the kids that come here. So in incorporating this into our model, we were able to now have more push-in services within our classroom setting. Choose Love program, SEL, character development, and so on has been a nice add in addition to being able to focus on some of our attendance needs. On the elementary level, this position is also supported where the person helps at both Willow and COH, but they're primarily housed here at CES. Full-time special education teacher is here at CES specifically due to our increase in 3rd and 4th grade resource room. As per an IEP mandates, these are needs that continue to grow. And we have put in currently a waiver for the programming here at CES, but part of the waiver is that you have to identify a plan moving forward. You can't just continue to put in a waiver, and so this would allow us to support that plan moving forward in hiring another special education teacher while allowing our programs to grow in that world. Okay, so on we go to the middle school. Similar as to identifying the needs that were at the elementary level, on the elementary level is the same idea at the middle school, where previous, our counselors, there was not a counselor per grade level. This allowed us to now have a counselor on each level, and specifically the counselor was housed in the 5th grade, so it was perfect for transition from 4th grade to 5th grade, really getting a critical lens on our students as they evolve through the middle years, and helps our kids have the tools and our staff to support the ever-changing needs of our kids on that level. Our .6 full-time teacher for our Success program. So our Success program is our skills program at the middle school. In adding a .6 full-time teacher for that program, we're able to provide electives in courses such as health, home and careers, and technology. So this allows our students in that class to grow socially, emotionally, and more importantly, applying skills to after they leave and go to the high school as they continue their path to the CBI program at the high school.
With regards to the hall monitors, do you hear me? With regards to the hall monitors, there's a significant need to have hall monitors at the middle school. Why is this? Just the nature of what's going on in the world today, particularly the activity in the bathrooms and the hallways in between particular periods. We don't have enough coverage, enough supervision going on there right now. We do have lunch monitors, but that's only during the lunch period. So what we're looking for here is 5 monitors. They would have a 5-hour span during the course of the day, and they'd be more ears, eyes, and supervision in that regard.
Okay, so next up is the high school. We have had conversations about building in more special ed support so we can be creative in our planning on that level. This would help address the increasing special ed needs at the high school, as well as expanding some of our co-teach offerings. And the same trend as you're seeing on the elementary, middle, and high school, as our social and emotional needs grow, so is our need to support our students in that program, in that area. So maintaining this position, currently we have 1 social worker in this position for our high school. This would allow us to have 2, which will allow us to support acute mental health concerns that we're seeing. This was a need prior to COVID, and it's certainly a need now. Mediation of student interpersonal issues, and then targeted student counseling. So remember, these are for non-mandated needs that typically, you know, you have your mandated needs, those are met. We have to meet them, but that doesn't mean that there's a lot of other children that could benefit from these types of supports. Okay, so for pupil personnel services, our ENL need is increasing every day. In fact, just today, CES enrolled 3 new students that have high needs in regards to their entering with little to no proficiency in English. So on top of already having a very large schedule, our ENL teachers, English is a native language, they're having difficulty meeting these mandates. Currently, our model is that we have 2 teachers split between the 3 elementary schools. We have 1 middle school and 1 high school teacher. So this would allow us to support the kids. We have, just to paint a picture for you, we have kids who might be coming in that have no language, and we're trying to determine their ability to learn, and perhaps they have more academic needs versus students who might be on the high school level taking an AP physics course that they're more than available to learn, but the content is so in-depth in the language that they're struggling in that regard. So it is a wide range of needs, and we are very thin in this area. Just to compare, Washingtonville has double the size of the ENL staff that we currently have. This trend, in speaking to all my colleagues around the county, is definitely increasing. So this is a need for now, and I can see it continuing to be a need in the future.
Megan,
Yes.
shouldn't this ENL, one FTE ENL teacher be state-funded or federal-funded?
This would have to be built into our budget. So this is for our English language learners, and these are teachers that are in our regular budget.
I mean, since the trends is going to increase,
Yeah, the federal funds end at this end of this year.
I mean, what's the reason that the trend is upward?
Less mobility from the city and
Yeah, we have an influx of families that are coming in that have this increased demand for this support to be successful within our learning environment. Okay. So then we have an ask for, so I'm just going to combine kind of the speech and the OT. This is for students, again, this is for the non-mandated world. And think about our like K2 kids. So these are kids that are coming in that throughout our processes where we have IST meetings, RTI meetings, we might identify students that are having issues with articulation, which is how you make sounds. You might have kids who are fronting their words. So instead of words that should be produced in the back of your mouth, they're coming out in the front of their mouth. So they might say tat instead of cat. These are just quick examples, but in the OT world, you might have little ones that are having a hard time grasping a pencil or cutting, using zippers and buttons and so on. So this became an increased need after COVID just because we found a lack of exposure when the kids couldn't go to school. But it does continue. So typically we're talking about 5 students in a class based on conversations within the building levels, that if we were able to provide these services, we would be able to pull those kids. So you would think of it almost like similarly to how you would have an AIS support, but it's not for academics, it would be for these needs. It would be for speech and OT, intensive instruction, and then released upon success. Okay, and that I think was my last one. Oh, sorry. Just kidding. So my last one here is the Committee on Special Ed. So currently our model is that we have one CSE chair, Committee of Special Ed person. And as you can see, our needs are growing. So as our needs are growing, that's an increased request for CSE referrals, CSE meetings, and so on. Right now, in order for all of them to be completed within the time that is required, our director of PPS and our assistant director of PPS, they're being taken away quite often to run these CSE meetings in conjunction with our CSE chairperson. So adding a co-chairperson would allow for these demands to be met that are just continuing to increase.
On the athletic front, the only request and the only need that they have right now speaks toward an assistant coach for the spring track and field teams. So every spring, keep in mind we have a boys and a girls team, but every spring we have a total of 125 to approximately 150 students who participate. We currently also have, for both the boys and the girls team, they each have a head coach and an assistant coach. So in total, it's 4 coaches. And you might ask, that seems like quite a bit. Why do we need an additional one? The reason for that is because if you've ever been to a spring or a spring track event, first of all, not every school is laid out the same way. Not every school looks just like our high school track and field events where they are. The venues are all over the place in many cases. You may have, yes, you have the running events on the track. You may have the throwing events down on the field way at the other end. You may have shot put over there in the corner. And the reason that they're requesting this is that it's very difficult for them to cover and provide supervision and coaching while all this is going on. So they're requesting, and they see the need for one additional assistant coach to provide that supervision, coaching, and just overall eyes on them. That brings us to the district-wide view in terms of the needs. And the very first item here is a 0.6 full-time equivalent for a communication specialist. As you can see here, and as you know, there's an ongoing, continuously ongoing need for the district to support, as well as the Board of Ed to support community communication. We also have a host of different social media platforms that we have to continually update and keep everybody apprised of. There's also a slew of output of information, and last but not least, just the overall district branding. Right now, that role is being handled by Megan, our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, as pretty much a stopgap. Stopgap from the perspective because it's very time-consuming, and it's really not part of her role, and it's taking time away from her. And the role that this position would fill would make it a more sustainable undertaking. It's just not reasonable to expect someone else to do this as kind of like a part-time situation. It's just not sustainable, and that communication need is going to grow as we move forward. I'll also indicate here, this is a 0.6 FTE, meaning I'm looking at it from the perspective of an employee. It could also be done through BOCES. BOCES has a COSER that we could purchase a certain number of days every week. The cost is almost identical. So whichever way we decide to go, the need is still there and the cost is still real. The last item here on this page is UPK. So let's talk about UPK a little bit here. This is our first year of UPK. We currently have, our enrollment is 58 students. And as we move forward, which we're currently doing starting today, we are taking in new applications. We also are going to have to potentially do a lottery, depending on the number of applications. As a result of that, we may have to add more seats. Okay? How will we know? We won't know until the end, but the way that things went last year, there's a great potential that that could actually happen. A couple things to keep in mind. These 58 students are at 3 different locations that we have vetted through our RFP process. Additionally, as Jim indicated, we're receiving partial funding for this. Okay? How much partial funding based on what we're paying? Just know that each of the 3 locations has a slightly different pricing structure, but generally speaking, we're looking at, after state aid, we're looking at about $4,000 a year per student. Okay? So what we're looking to do here is we're looking to kind of forecast and add and fund 22 additional seats. Where do we get 22? Why that number? First of all, as I mentioned, we have 58 currently. There's one of the locations, one of the programs, has 18 students. They have indicated they can take an additional 2. Okay, so there's 2. And then the 20 reflects the additional class that we would be looking at potentially. Okay. And lastly, building security enhancements. This would typically be handled through a transfer to capital, which means we're transferring money from the general fund to the capital fund to undertake a capital project. So what's happening with this? We just finished the site assessment, security assessment, that was spearheaded by the Orange County Sheriff's Department. It was also, we also had the Town of Cornwall Chief of Police involved, as well as the village. And we're waiting for the actual report itself, and we anticipate that there will be some needs that'll come from that report. How much? It's just not worth speculating on right now, but we will bring you up to speed just as soon as we have that information. So all in, everything that we've talked about just now, without obviously the building security enhancements, comes to about $2.6 million. It's quite a bit. There's a lot of needs right now. Okay? Now the purpose of this entire needs assessment is, as I mentioned, to keep in the back of our head. Because as we go through the process over the next 3, 4, 5 meetings, we're going to get a sense of where we stand with the budget in terms of this is the revenue we have and this is the expenditures. If we have more revenue than we have expenditures, we can look to this and we can identify that and prioritize that which we want to add. If our expenditures exceed our revenues, this is just going to be a list that can't get addressed this year. Okay? So let's shift to some of the parameters and variables. What's driving things? Looking at revenue first, under the governor's executive budget proposal, and again, it's just her proposal, okay? We received a $6.1 million increase in state aid, 5.2 of which consists solely of foundation aid. Couple points. This foundation aid increase represents the second 50% of foundation aid that a lawsuit kind of directed the state but they have to make the districts whole, okay? They have to bring us up to being fully funded, and that's what this last 50% does. That increase of 5.2, the calculation that the state uses also included an 8% CPI increase. As I mentioned before, we have about a $550,000 set aside that the state, I shouldn't say the state, it's the governor's proposal, has identified for us. And obviously, as we all know, the final budget from the state will be down the road between the legislature and the governor. So while the revenue picture looked pretty encouraging, we do have expenditures that we have to address. The first one is the teacher's retirement system. The good news here, it went down to 9.76 from 10.29. So it's about a 0.5% difference. That's a good move, okay, because salaries are high. Any district, it makes up a large part of the budget. On the employee's retirement system, again, the employee retirement system deals with the non-instructional staff. That actually dipped up just a little bit to 12.7. So all in all, not too bad. We could have expected greater swings, and we're glad we didn't see it. Even though these swings are not significantly big, keep in mind it's what it's applied to that can really change the picture. Salaries go up, this rate is just applied against an increase in salaries. So it's the other piece that we're going to be concerned about a little bit. Health insurance, good news again. The current year, the Orange Ulster Health Plan, the premiums went up 7%. For next year, we're looking at 4.5. Okay? Keep in mind, even though that's the premium increase, it also matters of the mix. People can go from single to family to two-person. Okay? People can retire. So now we have to pay for the retiree and the new person taking their place. We'll be talking about all this, but that's a good variable, and that's a good particular item that we're going to be focusing on. Transportation is a big one this year. Why? Because as I indicated previously in communication with the board, we had to go out with an RFP on transportation this year. The reason for that is we've been enjoying an extremely favorable rate with West Point Tours, and it pretty much got to a point, even with the increase at CPI, they just couldn't do it. So the increase we're going to see in transportation is significant, and it's going to play a factor. Special education out-of-district tuition, the big driver here is that whereas our student out-of-district placements have been fairly consistent over the years, it's taken a bit of a jump. That's going to be a factor. Employee contracts. During 2022, we settled 3 contracts. The teachers, the clerical, and the custodial/grounds contracts were settled. That plays a factor because obviously with every new contract comes new funding requirements. And then lastly, something new this year, the BOCES capital expense. This has to do with the capital project that BOCES is undertaking, that the districts actually fund. That is going to be an added expense that we'll have to include as well. Property tax levy cap. So the property tax levy itself, as we know, it's the pool. It's the pool of school taxes that we collect from the community, from the taxpayers. As you know, there's a cap. There's a calculation, and there's some variables that go into that calculation. The bottom line is that right now, the cap, the maximum allowable cap, is 2.82. Okay? That does not mean we are going there. Okay? It doesn't mean anything other than what it says. That is as high as the state will allow without a 60% override. Okay? For the current year, our cap was 4.87%. The difference in the cap had to do a lot with capital projects. Okay? Some of the variables that play into the cap is something known as the tax-based growth factor. This has to do with, in the district, how much brick and mortar improvements were made that increased assessments. So if there's new construction, or if someone put an addition on their house, that's hard brick and mortar. That gets built into a factor, and the presumption is if we're building more homes, they have to give us a little bit more leeway to raise the taxes because we have more students, okay? The second piece is the tax levy growth factor. That's essentially what's tied into CPI. It's capped at 2%. We know CPI is more than 2%, but that's the cap. So we're stuck with it. Looking at our historical picture, going back 9 years, the current year right now, we have a 0% tax levy increase. Our maximum allowable, as I mentioned just before, was 4.87. And if you look back over the remaining 8 years, you can see that we have an 8-year average of about 1.73. Our goal is going to be to keep the levy as close to zero, if not at zero, as possible. It's going to be challenging because we have a lot of needs. The board will have to make some decisions, and as we go through this entire process, again, it'll become very clear to you what decisions we have to make. And as I indicated, we have 4 more meetings. At the 4th meeting, we have to have the board adopt the budget. With that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have. Again, this is just a little bit of a high level of what we're going to be presenting on and what are the factors playing into it.
If nobody, Jim, go ahead.
So, thank you for putting this together. Obviously, we have 4 more meetings. I guess just the next meeting you'll be presenting. If we didn't do any additional staff present in the beginning, just the baseline budget, what percentage increase in spending, not necessarily in tax levies, but in spending, that would constitute? Because obviously, inflation has been a big issue in the past year.
Right.
So you'll be presenting to that figure to us next week, or
Right.
next 2 weeks from now?
Yes, I'll be
Okay.
basically presenting the rollover budget.
Thank you.
Much to your point, we had nothing. What does it cost us to open the doors on July 1st?
Okay, thank you.
Harvey, a request on that when you come back. Of those items that you listed were needs-based, could you differentiate those that are like required? Like the BOCES, right? We don't have an option there,
Right.
right? There's no
Correct.
choice, right?
Correct.
The tutorial, now that the governor has designated us as one of those districts, that money has to be spent, right?
Yes.
How we spend it on tutorial, but we've looked at it and we think the best way to spend that money is in what that first page that Megan talked about, right?
Right.
So if you could just differentiate the things that are able to be decided on versus those things that are
Sure.
required to be put into the budget, it would be very helpful.
Yep.
Thanks.
And, foundation is a big item this year, and even with the set-aside, what I can tell you is, obviously, like I said, this is just the governor's proposal. There's not a lot of clarity out there on a lot of this still, okay? It's just her proposal. The devil's going to be in the details. To your point, John, we have to do it. Question that everybody's asking is, well, if you can't do it or you don't do it, what does it mean? Does it mean you don't get the aid, the $550 that we're talking about, or does it mean you get penalized? No one knows these things. So we're just reporting what we know.
Harvey, of the 82 seats that we have available this year for UBK, why are we only filling 58?
Good question.
So,
I'll let Terry answer that.
A few reasons. One, it was our first year, so remember, we went out and met with far more than the 3 that we've ended up partnering with. There were, Megan, I think there were 2 to 3 others that just weren't ready to commit. So the 3 that we partnered with, we had a conversation that Megan and I and Harvey went to the provider, looked at their curriculum, their setup, and then we asked them a question and they asked us the question, what can you guarantee us by way of seats and what can we guarantee them by way of kiddos? So that's where the 58 came from. It wasn't even 60 because one provider said 18 was the max she could do this year. We were also looking at almost a non-negotiable 0% tax levy increase. We were advocating like heck for our capital project to move forward, and something that the board completely agreed on was 0% tax increase, so adding additional seats to that UPK line would have increased it. The caution that, and I'll share this more in future conversations, because Senator Skoufis, and he knows that if he was in the room, I would say this directly to him. I disagree with the approach of let's have every district roll it out when it's on the backs of taxpayers. We don't have the space to fully roll out all the seats that Cornwall is advocating. I have no idea where we would put 137 extra kids like Ms. Aguilar
That was my
noted.
next question, is do we even have the space,
Absolutely not.
the providers that can
Yeah,
can do it?
absolutely not. We can continue to partner with community-based organizations, but we also have to look at, the last point I'll make is, the lottery ran last year. I got a total of 93 applicants, far short of what we anticipate could have been out there by way of 4-year-olds for the 22-23 school year. Of those 93 applicants, 15 to 20% declined seats. So you have to remember, these are beloved providers, so if you're not getting your lottery choice at your beloved provider, you have a choice to make as a family. Do I send my child to the institution that I've sent them to since they were 1, or do I accept a free lottery seat? And a lot of folks stayed with who their family wanted to go with. So remaining on the wait list was about 17 families. So I did not want to falsely promise something. I think Jim and I discussed this, that you didn't want to have any negative impact on some well-established institutions by me saying, I'll guarantee you 20 seats. And if I had done that with one more classroom, we would have fallen short with our promise. So 60 was the right number for us last year. Harvey made a note that we have to exercise a little bit of patience this year. This go-around, I know we'll have parents coming out to advocate, which I fully support, but we've started an option of, the window opened today. We've committed to our 3 providers for those 60 seats. And then if we get a significant pop in numbers of families that are applying for the lottery, then we can make some decisions of going to another provider for an additional classroom. Megan and I already have the interested candidates in mind who might be interested in RFP, but we really have to let the numbers do the talking here. Again, if we had done 80 seats last year, we would have fallen short with one provider to say, sorry, we said 20, but there's only 17 kiddos available, and I can't even guarantee that those 17 families would have committed to that one provider. So it'll be an interesting journey. Remember, this is year 2 that we're embarking upon, but we're excited about the possibilities ahead.
Thank you.
If I may just piggyback on that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like at this time in the budget cycle last year, we were only getting 60 seats from New York, and the extra 20 seats for 80 appeared right before the budget was passed, right?
Days before.
Yeah, so that obviously makes it challenging to implement as well.
Absolutely.
Quick question, Harvey. The out of tuition for our special needs community, are we looking at what we can do to bring them home to, create the support that we need internally to not have to reduce that and keep our kids
Yes,
local?
yes, we always do that, and we have in the past, you might recall. The problem is, much like UPK, we're out of space. We don't have a single classroom that we could bring our kids back. So that's one of the constraints.
That's unfortunate. Thank you.
Couple of questions, Harvey. number one, you mentioned under revenue, the increase in foundation aid, or the increase in state aid, 6.1, foundation aid makes 5.2 of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's total, that's over the course of the last 2 years, this year and last year, 50% of which we're getting this year.
No, that 5.2 is this year's portion.
And that's more than last year then.
Good catch. So it was about, last year was, I think it was about 3.3 of an increase in foundation aid. You have to remember, foundation aid is, if I showed you the flow chart of the calculation, it's unbelievable how many data points and things. Things change within that calculation. One of the variables that's kind of easy to understand is just that 8% CPI increase. That was a nice increase as well. But yes, wealth factor, both income, property, host of different variables that play into that foundation aid. So that's good for us.
Yeah, if you said last year that this projection would be off by 70%, I would have thought we'd be getting 70%
No one,
less.
and we're not alone. Everybody
Yeah.
is in this boat.
No, that's great. Only other question, and maybe this is a Megan question. Very encouraged to see, the added teachers at the elementary level, ballooning class sizes. I think that's been mentioned in other contexts before. I guess the only question I would have there, we have more kids in a cohort, but over the years, they're gonna continue like a wave over the ocean, right? So I know we can't handle everything in one election cycle, budget cycle. But is there a sense that we'll be able to absorb that bump as they get deeper into the district, or is this probably a situation that we're going to have to keep addressing over the next few years?
Well, we've been addressing this situation as long as I've been here. So specifically here at CES, we have 4 or 5 sections on every grade level. At COH and Willow, there's 2 sections per grade level. There was a time when Willow had 3, and then the enrollment decreased, so they have 2. So what this does, to answer your question, is allows us to provide the supports that we need now based on the model that we've created, which is great. Adding the additional elementary teacher, most likely to be housed here, helps build that. So we would be a consistent 5 for most. And then over time, if we had to pull one of the teachers that are pushing in to create a new classroom in coming years, we could look to do that.
But then it just becomes like allocation,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah, got it. Okay.
Megan, adding 1 FTE elementary teacher will reduce those 8 classes currently at 25, 26 to how much?
How many specifically? I think
Yeah, I mean,
would it be 22
kind of
about? Yeah,
that's-
it would be probably about 22 in those
They will go
classes.
to 22?
About that, yeah. Like right now, our current first grade is across the district, very large. This, I mean, I can't give you a specific number this second because the enrollment trends change, but based on what we've been seeing, it would give us about 22 in that class, in that grade level. And remember that CES always gets the overflow, so it's difficult. You can only really max out in the other 2 buildings because they carry up. Here at CES, the overflow comes and then it just can continue to come. So this will help us to maintain, especially in that K2 world, you really want to keep those numbers low. This is high for that.
The target is 22, kind of?
Best instructional practices would say that that would be the best number, but unfortunately, we can't control the enrollment. That keeps ticking up.
Just to digress a second, just a little bit. Harvey made a comment that we're out of space. The comment made from the floor before and from Brendan was we have a possibility of a very huge development coming in. One of the things that we can at least request of the planning board and the building department is that they have to fund some of the infrastructure that we're going to need to pull off those kids. I don't even know if we've hit, if they're fully, the ones over by Lafayette, if we've gotten all the kids from there that we're going to be getting yet.
Yeah, I don't know if they're fully rented yet either. But if that development comes, right, wrong, or indifferent, our number 1 issue will be class size, period.
can't, our business is kids. So there's, I'm not saying turn away kids, I mean, one can't, but other than that, I'm just saying that the space to house those children need to be addressed.
Agreed.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. And just as a reminder, it's up there on the schedule is, I mean, we're at the first crack at this, so there's going to be an ongoing discussion that will get more detail, and the picture will come into clearer view over time. Thank you, Harvey.
Brendan?
Yes.
At what point would we as a board or members of the board have an opportunity to say, you know what, I would like X, Y, and Z included in the budget?
Well, that would,
Yeah, I'm looking for a raise, yeah. You can double it, I do.
well, I think, and that's more a Harvey question, but I think, well, so the question is, when do board members get to raise their hand and say, how about this?
When we circle back and look at all the needs, that would be your opportunity at that point, because then we're going to put everything back on the table and see what we have,
And that's meeting 3?
or sooner. Depends how, soon we get through stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Brandon, I was thinking, between meetings, I mean, we see the schedule here, the mechanism of receiving feedback and that, because this is an evolving thing, to feedback from the community and from us members, how can we do that?
Well, I think, I mean, you can always email the board, or email the administration. I think one of the reasons that Harvey puts this together, is that you have all your notes in one place, however you want to collect those. But I think making mental notes and bringing them up continuously at each meeting is the most effective way. If you want to document something in real time, certainly email is available to you. I think just generally, being this is your first time going through, I know my memories from my first time going through, once you get our next meeting, when we get a more clear picture on the revenue side, I think the trade-offs will start to come into clearer view, and that's probably where you're going to be in a position to be making those recommendations, comments, et cetera. But whenever you feel comfortable doing that is really up to you.
If I could also add, just going back to that, when do the needs from the board and the community get addressed? We have to also wait, as you just mentioned, for the revenue picture to come into view. And we're always waiting to the end of the legislative process, and that's usually, the end of March. So we're at their mercy to know exactly what our revenue picture is until that point in time.
And I would make a suggestion, start following Albany-related news, because that'll give you a sense of where the discussion is going and give you a sense of what are the remaining variables on a funding side. Although it's not finalized till the end of March usually, I would say a couple weeks out, you can have a good sense of where, reading the tea leaves and seeing where things are going. Okay, so that leads us to our second recognition of visitors. So anyone wishing to speak is invited to step to the microphone, identify yourself, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Again, anyone wishing to get a response directly can leave your contact information on the dais.
Hi, Dawn Lynch, former PTO president, Willow Avenue Elementary, and parent in the district, also former coach. So this is going to be difficult because I actually have questions, so I know I need to write down the information. I'm going to try to form my questions into statements. So when Harvey went through the budget, I know there's still meetings ahead where things need to be talked about and figured out. So I'm hoping, and like I said, it's more of a question, so I'm not making inferences, but I don't know who is consulted when we decide what positions are budgeted for, if that makes sense. Like what I'm hearing, and I'm a former middle school teacher where I did hall duty as a middle school teacher, and I'm not undermining any middle school teachers here. I know you have a lot on your plates, but that was one of our duties, was hall duty and lunch duty. So I come from, a different place as a middle school teacher. But when we're putting in the budget to hire 5 hall monitors, and all I hear is we need emotional support, and I have a first grader with 24 kids in his class who one of the students just speaks Mandarin, and we need this support for these kids who don't speak English. 5 hall monitors in the middle school doesn't seem really significant. So I'm hoping that we're talking to teachers and we're talking to administrators. I'm sure we are when we're forming the positions that we're spending the money for in these budgets. But the constant is like, you know, I'm hearing that we need this for the kids and this for the kids, but like 5 hall monitors, like, do we have any hall monitors now? None. It's teacher. So it's like, these are like the hall monitors, like, because we have security guards, we have people in the hallways. I just as a former middle school teacher and as a parent of a middle schooler and elementary school students, that was just kind of a little mind-blowing for me that we have such other needs for our kids that hall monitors kind of seem obsolete. So, but I will write my info down, and I thank you guys for all that you do.
Thank you, Dawn.
Is it on? Okay. Hello, my name is Eleanor Panzanero, and I am a community member and a teacher in this district. I'm here this evening, unfortunately, to speak again on behalf of the teachers and nurses and the staff. Sorry, I'm realizing I can't see this. I say unfortunately because I thought that the disrespect, the lack of gratitude, and the bullying would have stopped once the contract was settled. It hasn't. What most disappoints me is, unfortunately, the Board of Ed, and I say that sadly because I have taught many of your children, your grandchildren, and I've even taught one of the board members, including his sibling. But it disappoints me because I feel that blinders have been put on, and I'm curious as to how long those blinders are going to stay there. During the pandemic, we pleaded with you for help. We asked you to help us when our PPE was being denied. We offered to meet with you to discuss what was happening. We were assured that that was going to happen, and it didn't. We poured our hearts out, and the board did nothing. There was a great deal of conversation before on may and will. Apparently, the board may help when it's needed and not will help. Did you bother to report back when the teachers discussed these issues with you? I was assured, many of us were assured, that it was going to be discussed and that something would happen. It didn't. In fact, it was completely brushed under the rug, and during the Board of Ed meetings, I'm hearing how all of this money was being spent on PPE that was being distributed to the staff, to the teachers, to the nurses. Did you bother to come and check with us to see if that was the case? Because it wasn't. Did you come to our defense when a grieving mother was denied her days to grieve? Where were you when our nurses were stretched so thin that they could do no more? And here we are again. Teachers, nurses, and staff being denied the ability to take professional development courses simply because we asked that you abide by the contract that you wanted so badly. We are being punished like children. Where are you as the board? The members that were voted in by the community, and many of you endorsed by us, the CCTA. How disappointed I feel. We have put some of you in these seats, and yet you've turned your back on us. The direction this district is going saddens me. When I came here from a very reputable district in Westchester, a district that was on strike. And yet, I feel more turmoil here in the last few years than I did there. I am now retiring after 35 years of teaching. I love my job, I love what I do, and I love my students. And it saddens me that I am leaving before I want to because of what is happening in this district, because of how we are being treated. So when is the board going to intervene? I understand that there will be 3 seats open at the end of this school year. Again, the word will and may were discussed at great length before. So I may run for one of those seats, or I will run for one of those seats. Wouldn't that just be a hoot?
Thank you, Ms. Panzanora.
Good evening. I'm Brenda Wright. I'm the CCTA president. And tonight, I needed to wait to hear what the discussion was about policy 9645, disclosure of wrongful conduct, whistleblower policy, to see if it actually would be approved. You listened to the notice of claim that we sent. I'm asking you, the Board of Education, to examine whether there has been a violation of the whistleblower policy based on the notice of claim that was read tonight. I will be following up with an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Okay, that leads us to Board of Ed comment. I will start with Jim. I will also remind you, Jim, and everyone, that it is snowing out. So, and it's supposed to get very intense. But go ahead.
Is it snowing?
Well, that's what my computer tells me.
Okay. I did receive a message from my wife that I'm to put a spoon in the freezer when I get home. I don't know if I'm also supposed to put ice cubes in the toilet. I'm gonna pass tonight. I'm good. I'll let everybody get home safely.
Thank you, Jim. Richard.
All right, well, first off, I would usually start by thanking our student reps, but they got excused tonight, so I'll move on. I want to congratulate and thank Chief Hazard for all the work he's done for our community for a number of years. I know, what was it, like 20 plus, somewhere like that? So I just want to officially thank him for everything he's done. I want to thank Harvey for the budget presentation. It's very clear, based on the discussion we've had tonight, that we need to long-term plan. It's very important to long-term plan with everything that could take place in the future, influx of new students. We have to make sure that we have a long view approach to our needs and to future needs. Finally, I want to thank everyone that comes out to the meetings and that wants to be involved in the process, because it's very important, as in this presentation I highlighted, that we are a collaborative process. You know, we have a collaborative process with discussion and input from all our stakeholders in the community, whether that's students, teachers, community members. We have to make sure everyone is involved in the process and that we have open ears to everyone. So with that, have a good night, everybody. I guess all the students put frozen spoons and under your pillow and wear your pajamas inside out, and see what happens. So stay safe.
Thanks, Richard. Bass?
Thanks, Brandon. Just want to make a statement here for the record. One of the suggestions for under needs, one full-time equivalent ENL teacher. And the comment here, the description says, just to address cases where we have entering students with little or no proficiency in speaking English. These students do not drop from outer space. These students are the responsibility of the state of New York and the government, the governor of New York. Our taxpayers should not absorb the cost of $126,000 to fund one additional English teacher, full-time equivalent English teacher. The state and the governor of the state of New York should address that, not us. Another comment I would make, just again for the record, the visitation committee and the chair of the visitation committee is still working on the final report. We saw one draft. We said the draft, and we sat down, we met, we discussed the draft. Another committee member prepared another draft, and we agreed that these two drafts would have to be reconciled into a final report to be presented to the board and put in the archives. And we're still waiting up until tonight to see that final report. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bass. Larry?
First of all, I went to the Band Expo on February 13th. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. It is one of the neatest things to see, especially the finale, where the fourth graders and 12th graders and everybody in between are playing together. That's just so neat. And I'd like to congratulate our wrestling team. And I'd like to congratulate Tyler Reed for coming in first in the state. And I'll stop at that.
Stop when the applause reaches its apex. That's a good move. John?
Larry, you stole my thunder. Tyler Reed, he's a triple threat, academically, musically, athletically. Represents Cornwall really well. Amazing, amazing. Bass, thank you for bringing up the visitation committee issues. I think we need to get that done at our next meeting. And Margaret's not here, but I'm confident we're gonna get that right. As you said, it's taken too long. We're gonna get that right. There are a lot of things that we need to improve on, and I think that's one of them. Thank you for all who came out tonight. And get home safe. Thanks.
Louis?
Thank you. I will shamelessly plug our multicultural night at the end of March. If you've not gone to it, it's fantastic. It celebrates all the diversity in our district, all kind of in one place. It's food, it's garb, it's music. It's really a good sample. I would highly recommend it. I enjoy it. As well as, congratulations to Tyler Reed. Fantastic job. It just keeps going. You just keep hearing, new accomplishments from our students. I'll mention our unified bowling team had a successful season, and they actually won against our administrators. So kudos to them. Congratulations to that group. It's excellent. And last is we have a retirement. I saw Zig is retiring. It's kind of a little sad note. Good guy. I hate to see him go, but good for him. Congratulations on retirement, Get home safe.
And I'll just leave it there. I think everything has been said, and I've been speaking for most of the night. So, motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions. Motion carried. We're good.